Hi, Professor, my classmates, and the juniors. Today, my presentation's topic is Conciliation and Arbitration on the 1982 UN Convention. Here's my table of content. In my presentation, I will introduce 4 parts, including the introduction of the preconditions to specific procedures under the UN clause and their differences. Firstly, in the part of introduction, I will briefly talk about the preconditions of conciliation and arbitration procedures under the UN clause. The framework of Part 15 of the UN clause is the core of the International Maritime Dispute Settlement Mechanism. From Article 279 to 299, these 21 articles constitute the Convention's complete dispute settlement mechanism. The provisions of Article 280 means the application of the dispute settlement mechanism needs to fulfill the conditions about general obligations in Section 1, and the procedure shall serve the voluntary choice of peaceful settlement of dispute. To clarify the application of conciliation and arbitration mechanism under the UN clause, it is necessary to analyze these general obligations. Let's see this slide. As the last presenter introduced, there are 3 preconditions. The first one is procedure has not been excluded. The second one is the procedure has not been replaced. And the third one is the pre-obligations that exchange of views. When the above 3 preconditions are met, we will enter a new stage. Let's start the conciliation part. Conciliation is a common method for the peaceful settlement of international dispute. In detail, the conciliation mechanisms under the UN clause, including voluntary conciliations and compulsory conciliation. There are obvious differences in matters, but they can both apply the procedures specific in Annex 5 of the Convention. Article 284 and Annex 5 of UN clause is the provisions of voluntary conciliation. Generally speaking, Article 280 should be sufficient to guide people to choose the voluntary conciliation. However, the makers of convention took further action and paid attention to voluntary conciliation, and hope that Annex 5 will give a ready procedure to facilitate the application of voluntary conciliation. Specifically, the scope of the matters of voluntary conciliation is a dispute concerning the interpretation or application of this convention, and its eligible subject is any state party to the convention. The parties to the dispute may use the procedure under the Annex 5 Section 1 or may adopt another conciliation procedure by agreement. But no matter what procedures are adopted, they shall obtain the consent of the parties to the dispute. At the same time, since the constitution of Conciliation Commission is based on the consent of parties, there will be no jurisdictional issue in the voluntary conciliation proceedings. In short, the application of voluntary conciliation is not necessarily subject to the procedures provided in Annex 5. Rather, they can freely modify or choose their own procedures as long as they agree. Voluntary conciliation is the strong operational encouragement by the Convention for parties to take initiative to resolve dispute. Next, the provisions of compulsory conciliation are provided in Article 297, Article 298, and Annex 5. At the third United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea, the compulsory conciliation became a compromise route to balance the interests and promote the running of conference. Firstly, the scope of the matters is not random. The categories of dispute have a clear scope under the UN clause. and the general requirement is that the dispute must concern the interpretation or application of this convention. Article 297 deals with the marine scientific research dispute and the fisheries dispute arising out of sovereign rights or jurisdiction. This dispute of applying compulsory conciliation involves a clear abuse of discretion, that is, the state's arbitrary not complies with some basic obligations provided by the Convention. Article 298 deals with the expectation to the core interests of sovereignty, that is, dispute relating to sea boundary delimitations or laws involving historical base or titles. It is worth noting that it also provides additional time requirements and pre-obligations. However, in order to reduce territorial consent, the makers of the convention added a mixed dispute restrictive provision, which clearly states that the dispute concerning sovereignty or other rights over continental or insular land territory shall be excluded from such submissions. Secondly, the subject of compulsory conciliation is special. For dispute of Article 297, the eligible subject must be a coastal state. But for dispute of Article 298, in general, the procedure can only be requested by a state party that has not made a declaration to a state party that has already made a declaration. Thirdly, the start of compulsory conciliation is self-contained. No cooperation of the notified parties to the dispute does not bar the proceeding. It, in fact, gives the dispute parties the power to unilaterally institute compulsory conciliation proceedings. Behind these features is the prior acceptance of compulsory conciliation by the parties to the dispute arising for the ratification of the convention. In addition, the compulsory conciliation will involve the jurisdiction issue. The Conciliation Commission has the power to determine its own competence over the case. If you are interested in this part, you can refer to Timothy Compulsory Conciliation case in PCA website. In short, the unilateral institution is the most important feature of the compulsory conciliation procedure. As for the procedure matters of conciliation under Annex 5, the compulsory conciliation procedure can be understood as a compulsory start-up procedure that includes the essential elements of the voluntary conciliation procedure. In this slide, the conciliation report is important because its conclusions and recommendations shall not be binding upon the parties. It can make the parties to the dispute more secure in participating in the proceeding. Due to the time limited, please refer to my report for more details. Now let's move to the arbitration part. International arbitration is a traditional method for resolving maritime dispute. The arbitration mechanism under the UN clause have had a very high utilization rate in practice, because it made significant innovations in the design of rules on the arbitration procedure to expand the scope of the arbitration. But the arbitration procedure here is not including the commercial arbitration under Article 188, because it only involves dispute concerning the interpretation or application of a contract, not the convention itself. Therefore, the exactly arbitration procedure we talked are arbitration under Annex 7 and the special arbitration under Annex 8. There are two situations for the choice of procedure, because the arbitration has a voluntary list of general arbitration and its own unique oblique characteristics. The first case is the use of initiative. That is, a state party can choose arbitration procedures as a future dispute settlement measure by means of a written declaration. The second case is the acceptance. If a state party has not chosen the arbitration procedure of the procedure chosen by the parties are inconsistent, it shall be deemed to accept arbitration procedure under Annex 7 of the Convention. It is in the paragraph 5 you can see here. Next, the subject to and the scope of matters of arbitration procedure should be clearly distinguished. Arbitration procedure relies on the Union Clause, so its subject is naturally a party to a convention. As mentioned above, the arbitration procedure applies to any dispute concerning the interpretation or application of the convention, but the scope of matters of special arbitration is limited. There are 4 specific categories of dispute could be submitted to the special arbitral procedure, including fisheries, protection and preservation of the marine environment, marine scientific research, and navigation, including pollution from vessels and by dumping. Of course, these 4 categories of disputes can also be considered by the arbitration procedure under Annex 7. Legally speaking, arbitration and special arbitration are similar in procedure. Among them, the provision of default of appearance is important. Absence of a party or failure of a party to defend its case shall not constitute a bar to the proceedings, which reflects the compulsory promotion. The finality of award shall be complied with by party to the dispute. But these 2 arbitrations still differ in subtleties, such as the issues of memberships and the constitution of arbitral tribunal. For more specific procedural matters, you can refer to my report. In the last part, I would like to compare the conciliation with the arbitration. There are some differences reflecting in the following 3 points. Firstly, conciliation is written. In the dispute settlement mechanism under the Union Clause, the voluntariness inherent in conciliation itself is greatly reflected even in the operation of compulsory conciliation procedure. Where arbitration is dominated, it is the final guarantee for the settlement of the dispute. Secondly, the conciliation has greater flexibility. The control of the conciliation procedure is in the hands of the parties and the Conciliation Commission, so the result of the conciliation will be more in line with the psychological expectation of the parties to the dispute. But the control of the arbitration procedure is in the hands of the arbitral tribunal, and the procedure must be carried out in accordance with the arbitration rules. Finally, the legal effect of the result is different. The report made by the Conciliation Commission is not binding on the parties to the dispute, which will greatly reduce the risks and that the parties should bear. But the award of arbitration shall be final and without appeal, and it shall be complied with by the parties to the dispute. It means the result of arbitration procedure is legally binding. For my full conclusion, I think you can refer to my report. That's all my presentation. Thank you.